Good morning, everyone. We're just letting people filter through very quickly. We'll just let everybody filter through and then we will start the session. But good morning, everyone. Fabulous. So everyone should be filtering through. We are just waiting for our speaker from the council to join us, and then we will be starting the session. Fabulous. Here she is. Perfect. Right. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our online HR exchange on how to become a disability confident employer. We are doing this slightly differently today. We are doing it as an online webinar. So you will have a couple of additional functions that perhaps you haven't seen before if you joined one of our webinars. So what I'm just going to quickly do is I'll do some introductions and I'll go through with you in terms of what the structure is going to look like and the additional buttons that you may be able to use. So just as quickly as some introductions, today we've got myself. My name is Ellie Hand. I'm the training lead and senior HR advisor here at Biani HR and Employment Law, and I'll be running the session today. We have got Sophie Mazzola with us from the Sheffield City Council, who is a senior project officer, and she'll be going through how to actually be a disability confident employer and what the scheme looks like. And then we have also got my lovely colleague Hannah Haywood with us, employment lawyer at Biani HR and Employment Law, who will be monitoring our chat box today and will be answering your questions at the end of today's session. So, to explain a little bit to you about how the webinar works and the functions that you have got. So you'll see that you've got a chat box, you've also got a Q&A box. So what I would ask that you do is any questions that you have throughout today's session, if you just want to pop them in the Q&A box, the Q&A function, then what we'll do is we'll collate all of your questions and answer them at the end of the session. Okay, some of them may be answered as we go through. See if they are, we'll tick them off. If you use the chat box, that's okay. We're still going to pick up your question. It's not to worry, but if we could just try and put them in the Q&A function, that would be amazing. So before we begin, I just want to go through a couple of things with you just to make sure everybody feels comfortable. So I wanted this to be a safe space. If you're unsure about something, please ask. There is no such thing as a silly question. Every question is valid. Everybody's query or, idea is something that we want to hear about. So please ask as many questions as you want and nothing is silly. The other thing to bear in mind is as we are talking about disabilities, as we are talking about the disability confident scheme, I want you to feel confident to use the language that you have available to you. So the language that we use today, please don't feel nervous in using it. Use the language that you have available to you on the slides or that you are common or familiar with using. Okay, goes without saying, please respect each other. Please respect everybody here on the webinar today. Don't ask a question that you feel would upset somebody directly, but equally, everything that we say here today is done in a completely confidential manner. And I would just ask that nothing is shared past this webinar. The other thing to bear in mind is just a content note. So we are going to be talking about disabilities. We may talk about certain medical conditions in slightly more detail, and we are going to look at the legal standing behind that. So I just wanted to make everybody aware. If at any point you feel uncomfortable with a condition that we are talking about, or you feel uncomfortable with a piece of legislation, then please feel free, to dip out the webinar and rejoin, or just to take a minute. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of background as to who we are. So we are Biani HR and Employment Law, and we are a regulated law firm who specialise in employment law and human resources. So we support businesses, we support employees, we support business owners, we support business startups, And we have a dedicated team of solicitors, HR advisors, and coaches who can support you on an employee journey. So we can support you with everything from recruiting somebody into your business through to terminating somebody from the organisation and everything in between. So anything that deals with people management, we are the go-to individuals. We also do a lot of training for businesses. So we provide a lot of HR training for you as individuals and businesses to ensure that we are upskilling and providing knowledge to give you the confidence to effectively manage staff. As you'll see here, we have got a lot of accreditations. We have picked up some awards in the past, which we are extremely excited and proud about. So the most recent ones that we've had is sort of the best HR business in the 2023 Unlimited Awards and the best employment law solicitors in Sheffield. So now we're going to start with our content today. And we're going to go through sort of what is a disability to start with. We're going to set the scene. And we're going to talk about what it is and what we need to be mindful of when we are welcoming an individual into our organisation who may have a recognised disability. We are then going to pass over to Sophie, who is then going to talk to us about what the scheme actually is and why it's so important and why businesses need to be aware of what it is. We'll then come back around to looking at the legislation as to what that may be, and then we'll answer your questions at the end. Because we want this to be an interactive webinar, there will be polls that pop up on your screen in 3 parts of today's webinar. There will be a slide that tells you when the poll is coming, but please take part, please ask questions, and please just answer the questions as honestly as you can. This is for you to learn, and it's for us to guide you through that learning process. So first, we are going to look at what is a disability. So we have a legal definition as what a disability is. So what the law does actually say is that someone's disabled if they have a physical or mental impairment, and that impairment has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on a person's ability to carry out their normal day-to-day activities. So when we say long-term, we're meaning around about 12 months, so 12 months or more. So for a condition to be considered as a legal disability, it needs to be substantial, it needs to impact day-to-day activities, it needs to have lasted for 12 months or be capable of lasting 12 months, and it can be either a physical or a mental impairment. There are some conditions, some progressive conditions and impairments that are classed as automatic disabilities under the Equality Act 2010. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly mention to you what those automatic disabilities are. Now I'm going to tell you the 3 that are automatic. This doesn't mean that there's no other condition out there that could be considered to a disability, or that these are any more protected necessarily than any other condition that could qualify and meet this definition. It just means these are 3 conditions that are directly named and identified in the Act. So the 3 legal disabilities and automatic disabilities that we have are cancer, HIV, and MS. Okay. So we've got 2 different types of impairment, as that definition there has just explained to us. So we've got physical impairment. So some physical impairments could be hearing impairments, visual impairment, cerebral palsy, cancer diagnosis, multiple sclerosis, amputation. They are physical impairments. So they are things that impact usually how you do something. So your mobility around something, or physically it's something that you may be able to see or you may not be able to do as a result of a movement. Okay, now that is not an exhaustive list. So it's not just that anything that I've said on here is a disability, anything that I haven't isn't. We get a lot of questions around whether visual impairments are actually automatic disabilities. So a lot of people will ask if visual impairments are automatic, because if you're blind or you have eyesight impediment, would that not affect substantially your day-to-day activities? And usually it's long-term. I'm not, there's nothing to say that absolutely would not be covered under that definition, because like I've just said there, it's long-term and it substantially impacts day-to-day activities. It's just not registered and logged as one of those automatic disabilities, but it probably absolutely would impact and be qualifying through that definition there. We then also got some mental impairments. So some mental impairments that we have here is autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, traumatic brain injuries, anxiety, depression, dyslexia, dyspraxia. Some of these conditions here are often covered under the umbrella term neurodiversity. So that is covering mental impairments that have substantial impacts on your day-to-day activities. Not a lot of people recognise and understand that anxiety and depression are covered through a mental impairment. Okay, so I am just going to go through some inclusive workplace statistics here. So in 2023, there were more working age disabled people in employment in the first quarter of the year than there was the year before. So what we can see by the statistics is we can quite clearly see that there is an improvement. We can see that there are more individuals entering into the place of work who may have a recognised and registered disability. Okay, so I'm just going to put another slide up for you here, which shows the comparison of workplace statistics. So you'll see here that the gap is closing and we are seeing more individuals enter into employment where they have a disability, but currently the gap in those that are disabled and those who are not is sitting around 29% of individuals. Okay, so we're seeing a 29% difference between somebody who has a disability and somebody who does not in the place of work. You'll see there, I don't know how many of you are from the Yorkshire region, but from when you're looking at the United Kingdom statistics and when you're looking at Yorkshire, Humber, you know, we are all relatively levelling out. What this statistic does show you here is that sort of the North East and Northern Ireland perhaps don't have as many disabled individuals in the place of work compared to non-disabled. However, you know, you can see those gaps are slowly closing and they are getting better. So what we need to think about is if we want to become a disability confident employer, if we want to, you know, be inclusive, be more diverse, you know, have an inclusive place of work, how does that impact us from a recruitment perspective? What do we need to do to make sure these individuals are feeling comfortable in the place of work? And how would we actually change or amend our recruitment process to make individuals with a disability feel confident and have equal opportunity at the point of recruitment? So one of the key things, and for me, this goes without saying, and this is for a candidate who has a recognised disability and for a candidate who doesn't, but we need to be clear with the candidates about the process and explain each step and the time frames around the aspects of what that process looks like. For me, that's clarity for everybody anyway, and I think that's really important whether somebody has a disability or not, but particularly if you have a mental impairment, it is so important that they can understand the process itself and you're giving them time to process each step so they know what to expect. Sometimes with certain conditions, it's the fear of not knowing that unfortunately impacts them greater than actually them knowing what their process is. We need to encourage candidates to request reasonable adjustments when they're applying for roles. So this could be asking somebody at the initial application or your screening form, and then every step in between. So when you initially screen call somebody for a job with you, there's no harm in you asking at the end of that screen call, are there any adjustments that you would require both throughout this interview process and at the point of at the point of coming on board? Now, somebody might be thinking, well, what if they ask for an adjustment that I can't provide? What if they ask me something that I don't want to do for them? We're going to cover that in the second part of today's webinar when we talk about the legal considerations that you need to have as an employer for where potentially there could be risks there for you. So hold that thought, we will come on to that. It's so important that you're asking, you know, do you need adjustments to an interview, for example? So if you had somebody that had a slight physical impairment, if they had amputation of perhaps the leg, and they were either using crutches or they had a wheelchair or they had some form of mobility enhancing tool to support them in the mobility of walking around and getting around places. I'm sure as individuals would feel that you need to ask if they need adjustments in case they want an interview on the ground floor, or do they need accessibility? So, do they need a ramp? Do they need a lift? Do they need support? Same with individuals who perhaps have support when it comes to transport. So, if somebody can't drive, or if somebody relies on public transports or lifts, again, it might be worth asking them if they need adjustments, and that could be the timing of the interview. It could be the location of the interview, simply to support them with that. But if you don't ask, you don't know, and you can't make those adaptations to your process. You need to avoid using generic phrases and actually explain the purpose of the role and your day-to-day activities and responsibilities in detail. Again, for me, that is just something that we should be doing for all candidates, really, just to ensure that we can get the best person into the place of work, really explaining to them what the job entails. The worst thing is somebody turning up to the place of work and not really understanding what to do. We all, as professionals, and everybody on this webinar, I'm sure, would feel the same, that if you're asked to do a job, you want to understand what it is that you're being asked to do, whether you have a disability or not. You do need to look to provide a structure for the interview. So, what topics of conversation will there be? Do they need to prepare anything? Somebody who perhaps is autistic, or somebody who has ADHD, or even dyslexia, if you're asking them to do a written test of some description, or you're asking them to talk about a certain topic, they may need a little bit more structure around that. Sometimes, unless you provide specific instruction as to what the question is that you're asking and you leave it very broad, a person with autism or ADHD do find it difficult to sort of understand what that question is, and they may talk around the topic, which unfortunately places them at a disadvantage when it comes to providing the outcome or the question that you're wanting the response to, as they haven't given you that because the instruction that you provided in the first place was not clear and definitive as to what you would like the outcome to be. Again, for me, this is something that goes without saying, but just give out directions to the office or a map as to where you're based, particularly if you're in sort of a more secluded area, a strange area, if it's a new property as well. If you're based on a new property or you're off the beaten track, just make sure you're giving out directions to the office or a map of where somebody can go. What I find often as well is when you're recruiting somebody, nobody actually tells you if there's parking or not. If somebody's coming in their car, they need to know where to park, and if so, where the nearest parking location is. For somebody that has a mental impairment, if they turn up to an interview and they cannot park, or if they turn up on their first day of work and they cannot park, that unfortunately may be a trigger for them, and therefore that would set off the employment on a really negative front, and they perhaps wouldn't be able to come and work for you or come to the interview because they feel that they can't get past that barrier. Always provide the names of the people who are on the interview panel so that you can get familiar with them, you can understand, and you feel comfortable in their presence. You really do need to understand who is there, and so that you can do a little bit of research, but to make somebody feel comfortable as well. Try not to ask too many sort of general questions. Ask specific questions based around the candidate's real or past experiences. So if you said to somebody, tell me about yourself, they may sort of explain to you, and they may be wanting you, or thinking that you're trying to really dig down and see if they have got a disability or if they have a physical disability. If you said to them, well, tell me about yourself, has anything happened to you? Something like that. They may feel that you are directly asking that question as a result of something that you can see, as a result of a disability that you can evidence through them, or from a mental impairment side of things. Again, particularly somebody who is on the autistic spectrum, that question's slightly too broad for them. So they may then go down this path of explaining to you everything about themselves, and you may turn off, and that isn't their fault because you asked them quite a broad, open question. So again, you need to think about your questioning techniques when you are recruiting someone, particularly if they are a neurodiverse individual. Okay, you need to allow the candidate to refer to notes that they've made during the interview. Again, this is more specific to an individual who has it neurodiversity, someone is considered to be neurodiverse because, again, they may feel that it helps for them to jot down notes. If they've got social anxiety, for example, they may be really nervous. Try not to judge somebody's body language and the way that they interact with you on the initial stages in that interview, because it may be because they are neurodiverse and that's why their body language and their interaction isn't what you've seen in previous candidates. So just bear that in mind. You also, apologies, I'm skipping through too quick there. You also need to think about prompting the candidate and sort of promoting them um, in order to sort of extract so promoting them in a way of providing them with really positive feedback. So say that was a great answer. Thank you very much for that. But what about this? So prompting them as to the specifics that you want to get out of somebody, because they may have all of that information there. They may have it ready to tell you, but they may have just forgotten, or they may not feel confident to say it to you. It may be written down on another piece of paper. So you need to prompt them in order to make them think, oh, actually, I do know about that, and I will tell you about that now. So when you're thinking about inclusive interviewing, you need to think about the way in which you interview someone. So interviews are a really great way to learn more about a person, to see how they conduct themselves in different settings, how they conduct themselves in front of sort of business leaders, in front of individuals. Um, Quite a lot of employers now put a lot of emphasis on things that aren't really that important. So concentrating on a person's eye contact and sort of eloquence during the interview themselves. So if somebody isn't looking at you directly in the eye during that interview, it doesn't mean they're not a fantastic candidate. It may just be, again, that they are quite nervous, or they are quite shy, or they struggle with that interaction element there. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't do the job to the absolute best of the standards. So you do need to think about, how do you make your interview? How do you think about your interview being really inclusive and not making predetermined, preset judgments about a person? So some things to consider are, do you need to offer more time for individuals to answer questions? So I always recommend, don't book in back-to-back interviews. Now, I know this is a webinar on how to become a disability confident employer, and we're talking mainly around, being inclusive and really providing enough time for somebody who has a physical or mental impairment. But just from a standard, piece of general advice, you should never block out time either side of an interview, because you need to give yourselves time to think and to digest, because when you've sat in an interview for an hour to an hour and a half, it's a lot of information to process. You need to give yourself time. But not only that, if a candidate's got some really good ideas and some really good things to tell you about, you need to allow them the time to explain that to you. If somebody is neurodiverse, they may struggle to get information out quite quickly. They might need to break it down. They might need to be asked several questions. You might need to repeat questions. If somebody's got some form of physical impairment, so if they are visually impaired, or they have a hearing impediment, again, you need to think about, do we need to ask questions again? Do we need to guide them? If we've got pieces of paper, do we need to explain what we're doing? Particularly if someone's got a visual impairment, if they can hear papers ruffling or they can hear movement in the room itself, it's going to make them feel really unsettled and really uncomfortable. So you'd need to allow extra time to explain all of that, what is happening. So always book yourself enough time to ensure that you are being inclusive within that interview. You need to think, is the candidate clear on the expectations? Have you outlined and thought about the questions ahead of the interview? Do they know what role they're coming into? So again, thinking of both physical and mental impairments, if you had somebody who was coming to quite a physical role, and they needed to be able to undertake, let's say they were a tree surgeon, for example, that may not be appropriate for somebody with a visual impairment. But if you've not made that very clear on your application form, or if you've not set out clear expectations to the candidate, somebody may come to that interview not knowing what the expectations are, and then unfortunately it makes that setting really uncomfortable for them as an individual. Now that probably was um, quite a broad example to give you there, but it's just to show you sort of how important it is to set those expectations. You need to think about, are you going to give them feedback? And is it going to be an appropriate amount of time to give that feedback? So, are you going to give feedback at the end of the interview? Are you going to interview more candidates and then give feedback after the interview? If it is somebody again who is neurodiverse, or they've sort of shown a sense of anxiety around the process, you need to think about the feedback that you provide and how that is delivered to the individual. Because again, don't forget, you need to protect yourselves as businesses and as individuals. So when you are providing feedback, you need to think about the language that you're using and the definitions and the reasons as to why you are giving for somebody either being successful or not being successful. You need to think, does the applicant need a representative or have additional communication requirements? So if you did have somebody who had a sight or hearing impediment, do they require somebody else to come to the interview with you? If they are dyslexic and you are providing a written test as part of that interview, do they require special equipment or additional equipment to provide them with assistance in creating or producing that piece of work for you? So these are the things that you need to be thinking about. Now, your inclusive interviewing, your inclusive application process can only be based on individual circumstances. So you can have a set process. So you can say, we screen call, we interview, we do a written test. That's okay. What you then need to think about is, how can we adjust and flex this process to be inclusive if we were to get a candidate who had X condition, or if we were to get a candidate who had Y condition? What would we be able to do to ensure that we are being inclusive and we are ensuring they have an equal and equitable opportunity as those other candidates who've applied for the role? So, just some benefits of hiring an individual who has a disability. So, recruiting disabled employees does have a number of benefits. So, it's important to note that not all disabled people receive the same opportunities as everybody else. But some of the benefits that you do need to consider is improved culture and a variety of talents. So, by providing opportunities to disabled individuals, you are adding variety of highly motivated professionals to the team. By welcoming disabled employees into your company and into your community, really, you are evidencing that you are providing an equal and equitable opportunity and creating a more inclusive space. Now, something that isn't on here, which really, is something that I'm going to expand on, is your employer brand and the way that you are seen to the general and wider public as a result of your inclusive interviewing and inclusive recruitment process. So ultimately, if you have an improved culture amongst your staff and your staff like the way that you are, providing adjustments to them, you are recruiting and you are being inclusive and equitable, you then need to think about what that does for you from an employer brand perspective. A lot of individuals now are looking for employers who are diverse, who are inclusive, who have real values and beliefs around providing an equitable place of work for them to be. So you do need to think about that. By providing an individual with a disability equal opportunities and opening doors within a company for you, you are gaining access to a wider pool of talent. So if you are open to interviewing and employing somebody who is neurodiverse, you need to think that may be a variation of talent that we haven't already had. They all have superpowers, and I think that is what a lot of individuals with neurodiversity refer to as being their superpower, is something different and something that sets them aside from somebody else, where they can do a task really well and really intensely and really detailed. So again, you're sort of opening that pool to ensure that you have a wider variety, a diverse workforce, which effectively will vary your talent, which will only improve your efficiency and performance to both your clients, to your other employees, and to the service that you provide. So we are just going to do a quick poll just to sort of understand your understanding of what a disability is, and just to find out a little bit more information as to if you need some support, or what you've understood from that first part of the session there. So I am just going to launch a poll with you now. So hopefully this should all come through on your screens and you should be able to vote in our Disability Confident Poll 1 here. If you are unable to vote, then please just let me know. If you just want to drop a message in the group chat to say that you're not able to vote, then we can try and sort that out. But hopefully this should have popped up on everybody's screen to enable you to vote on this poll. I will just give you sort of 2 to 3 minutes just to vote, just to make sure that you do feel comfortable and that everybody has the opportunity. I can't see that anybody is voting at this moment in time. Is that because, oh, there we go. They're all rolling in now. As soon as I said that, we're getting votes rolling in, which is great. So I will just give you a couple of minutes just to fill this out, and then we will end the poll and we'll go through the responses that everybody submitted. Now, what you can't see is you can't see what everybody else has voted. We can make that available, but all votes are anonymous, so you won't be able to see what everybody else has voted. Fabulous. I will just give you another couple of minutes and then we will start going through it. But like I said, don't forget that Q&A function is there. So if you do have any questions around what we've already discussed, around sort of disabilities, a little bit more background, particularly the recruitment side of things as well, and being an inclusive employer, then please drop them into that Q&A box or to the chat box. And my colleague Hannah will be able to go through those with you at the end of today's session. But please feel free to use that. And like I said to you right at the start of the session, please don't feel that you cannot ask a question. No question is a silly question. Every question, if you don't know something, it's highly likely the person sat next to you or a person sat in another room or somebody else on this webinar also will want to know the answer to that question as well. Fabulous. So pretty much everyone has voted now. We are just waiting for a couple more. So I'm just going to give you around about sort of 10 to 15 seconds and then I will start going through the answers. For those of you that have obviously taken part in the poll and have answered the questions, obviously you won't be able to see the results themselves. However, I will go through them, and if you want to score yourselves, if you want to jot down which ones you got right, which ones you got wrong, that is absolutely fine. Okay, so question 1 was, for a disability to be covered by the Equality Act, how long must a person have had this condition? It is 12 months or more. Okay, so the definition is a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term adverse effect to carry out your normal day-to-day activities. So by long-term, we mean 12 months or has the ability to last 12 months. So going on to question 2. We had, which of the following questions will not be relevant in determining whether or not an employee is protected by the definition of a disability under the Equality Act? So somebody's put if the employee is registered as disabled. Oh, I can't see the full question there. So it says whether the employee has a physical or mental impairment, whether the impairment has an impact on the ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities, and whether the adverse effect is long-term. So on that one, it was option 1, so whether the employee is registered as disabled. In order to determine whether or not someone is registered under the definition of a disability, they do not have to have a registered disability through the NHS from a medical standpoint. What you have to consider is whether they have a physical or mental impairment, whether the impairment impacts their day-to-day activities, and whether the adverse effect is long-term. It doesn't have to be an already recognised disability through a medical professional to be covered under the Equality Act 2010. So we've got question 3. So is it appropriate to ask an employee about their disability during the interview? Now, we've got 2 split answers here. Some of you said no, some of you said sometimes. The answer here is sometimes. So it depends on the reason why you are asking them about their disability. If you're asking somebody about a disability or a physical or mental impairment, is it to better understand what adjustments you need to make for their role? Is it to understand if they have the actual capabilities to undertake the role from a health and safety perspective and from a legitimate aim perspective? So it is based on individual circumstances and why you are having to ask the question. So, yes, sometimes it is appropriate, but always think about the reasoning why you are asking those questions. And it is so important to ensure that you have something called an objective justification as to why those questions have been asked. So there's a difference between subjective and objective. So subjective is opinion-based usually, whereas objective is basing information and decisions on facts and evidence that you've collected. So if you can say to yourself, well, the reason I asked that question is because of X, Y, and Z, we needed to know X, Y, and Z, you will have formed your objective justification, which may make it okay to ask that question as part of interview. So the fourth question was, how many automatic disabilities are listed under the Equality Act 2010? The answer is 3. Almost everybody did get that correct. And then the final question was, does an employer have an obligation to ask a candidate if they require reasonable adjustments at interview? The answer here is actually no. So you don't have an obligation. There isn't something that says you have to. However, it is something that you may want to consider offering and asking if somebody needs an adjustment as good practice to ensure that you are an inclusive employer who is welcoming and opening to an individual who has a disability. So I am going to end that poll now. So thank you ever so much, everyone, for taking part in that poll. Hopefully you enjoyed that and you understood and learned a little bit more about what we've already discussed. So what I am going to do now is I'm going to pass over to my colleague Sophie, who is now going to talk to you a little bit more on how to become a disability confident employer and what the scheme actually means.
Hi everybody, can you hear me okay? I'm assuming so. Good, brilliant. My name's Sophie Mazzola. I work for Opportunity Sheffield and we are Sheffield City Council's Employment and Skills Department. If you haven't come across us before, or maybe you have, we help create job opportunities and break down barriers to employment. We help local businesses grow and develop a skilled workforce. We help employers navigate and understand and implement financial incentives, grants, funding, opportunities related to employment and the skills agenda. If you did need some support in that area, you would get assigned a dedicated account manager to support you through all of that to move forward doing that. So, what does it mean to be a disability confident employer? It's really important, I think, or it's really key to understand what you can talk about in order to really boost your brand, like Ellie mentioned. So you will challenge attitudes towards disability, you will increase understanding, and you will remove barriers to disabled people and those with long-term health conditions. You'll draw from the widest possible pool of talent and secure high quality staff. So I'm going to do some stats as well. They kind of do cross over with Ellie's, but I think they're really, really important. In 2022, Big Listen survey found that of the approximate 870,000 working age adults with a learning disability in the UK, they have the lowest employment rate of any condition or disability. But 86 of the people that filled out that survey want to be in work. They want to be in paid full-time work. People with a learning disability tend to stay in their jobs three times longer than their non-disabled co-workers. And employing people with a learning disability has a positive effect on staff morale. So that's why it's incredibly important to look at becoming disability confident. And they're just some of the benefits that you can gain. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is just a brief indication about all the different levels. So you've got level 1, which is disability confident committed. So I'll go on to that in the next slide slightly, but there are a few things that you have to do in order to become level 1, and some things that you have to commit to and things that you have to be implementing in order to gain that badge. Level 2 is a little bit more involved, and you have self-assessments and you commit to more things in order to be a disability confident employer. Level 3, you will really be seen as a champion in your local area. And when you do level 3, you'll have somebody come in from the outside that will assess your level 3 and to see how disability confident you are. You have to start at level 1. So you have to become disability confident committed first before you can move on to level 2, and then following level 2 before you can move on to level 3. When you complete each level, you receive a certificate, you receive a badge, and it's great for branding, and it's great to shout about your achievements and what you're actually doing to achieve this disability confident label. And just at the bottom there, you can see that there's a couple of little timestamps there. So how long you've got them for and how long they're valid for. So you can see it's 12 months for level 1, 24 months for level 2, and 36 months for level 3. And that fits in with how much time each badge takes and how much you're asked of. So if you're level 3 and you're a confident leader, it means that you've put a lot of effort, resources and time and learning behind that, and that's reflected in how long you hold that certificate for. So how to become disability confident level 1, and that's disability confident committed. So it means that you must agree to the commitments and identify at least one action that you'll carry out to make a difference for disabled people. And that means as well that although you're maybe doing one thing that you agree to, you're committed to doing more. So you're eventually going to look at implementing more things that will support you on that journey of being disability confident. So those commitments are inclusive and accessible recruitment, communicating vacancies. So where do you communicate your vacancies? Do you advertise them in the same place? Do you advertise them to a variety of places and diverse places to make sure that you are spreading that vacancy as far as possible to those people that may not have access to it? Offering an interview to a disabled person, providing reasonable adjustments and supporting existing employees. This can be a variety of ways, and we'll go on to that a little bit more about how we can potentially support with that. So you must identify at least one of these things to commit to support you being level 1 disability confident committed. Work experience, work trials, paid employment, apprenticeships, job shadowing, traineeships, internships, student placements, sector-based work placements, and challenge attitudes towards disability. Now, some of those are quite broad and vague, but a lot of those are really easy things that you can implement. For instance, a work trial. For somebody that has a disability, a work trial is really, really valuable, not only for you, but them as well, to see how they're going to manage the commute, to see how they're going to get into the office, to see if they do have any troubles parking, to see if it's something that they can commit to as well. And once you've done a work trial, you can then go on and look at implementing things that were highlighted during the work trial. So it's not there to catch anybody out. It's not there to make it harder. It's there to make it so the steps to employing somebody with barriers is a lot easier for you and them. People with employing people with a learning disability really does change public perception of a workforce. So even the fact that it may not end in employment if you do something like job shadowing or work experience or work trial, but it is showing that you're willing and committed to changing how you work to make sure that you can offer those opportunities to somebody. Now, part of what we offer as Opportunity Sheffield and the local authority is supported work. supported employment scheme. So that is a team of 3. If you go back up to the next slide, is that okay? Brilliant. Yeah. It's a team of 3 people. They're job coaches, and they liaise with both employees and candidates. They are there as the first line of support to guide you through the process of implementing any of those things that you want to be committed to. So it helps adults that have a learning disability, autism, or both, and it puts them in the best position to gain employment, and to maintain that employment is really key. So once they're in that employment, they also have this support for 12 months. It uses a partnership strategy. So that work coach is partnered with that individual, but they're partnered with you as well. It helps you just have that extra bit of support if there's anything that crops up you're unsure of, you're unaware how to navigate it, or you'd like to do something but you actually want to check that it's in the best interest and you're doing it correctly. It's a really, really new scheme, so you may not have heard of it anyway, but there's a chance you may not have heard of it because it's not been around for a long time. They're just coming into their 2nd year of supporting people. And because of that, it received its first assessment from the British Association of Supported Employment, and they received a 90% in the assessment. So they've got an excellent rating. This is not something that all local authorities do, so we are very much a market leader, and it's very much something that we'd encourage employers to take advantage of when they're looking at employing anybody with a disability. I can circulate the contact details for this as well, but just to give you a bit of a familiarity, there's Richard, Jeanette, and Gail, and they're the key workers that are going to support you through that. So moving on to something that we do, we offer support as well, and it is via fully funded training. So if you've got anyone in your staff that you think would benefit from training, and we often say that there are key staff members that you'll automatically think, yes, they would really benefit if. So recruitment, they need to be fully aware how to make recruitment processes fully accessible, right from putting out a job advert to interviews to onboarding and people's first days in the office or from home or wherever that may be. You have line managers, you have HR members of staff, and anyone that's responsible for implementing people management policies and practices that will affect how someone's supported with a disability or health condition. This is also anyone that is the first point of contact for any staff members to discuss their health concerns or change or any adjustments. And it could be to working hours, it could be to equipment, it could be to software. It's just to support anybody to perform to their full potential. It's also somebody that's going to manage absences and keeping in touch if someone's off work. Are those staff members that you've currently got trained in doing that, or do they feel completely confident? If the answer is no, then we want to support you to access training that will really support this. So you've got things like equality and diversity, mental health first aid for managers, which is a new course, disability awareness training, understanding autism, HR essentials, leadership and management, understanding specific learning difficulties, and principles of working with individuals with learning difficulties and common health conditions. A lot of these courses can be delivered in a classroom, they can be delivered online, they're all accredited, they're all short interventions to really boost people's knowledge and give them the confidence to not only apply to become disability confident, but also to commit to doing that in their day-to-day roles, and supporting employees that you've already got or onboarding new employees as well.
Fabulous. So we're just going to do a quick poll in relation to the disability confidence scheme itself. If you've got any questions for Sophie and you'd like her to answer them, then please pop them in the chat. I can see that we just had one through around the training. So please pop them through in the chat and Sophie will be able to answer those at the end, but we are just going to put up another poll here. This poll is going to be talking to you about what the disability confidence scheme is, but it's also going to be asking you sort of what stage you're at as an organisation, where you feel you are, And if, having listened to what Sophie's just gone through there, you're thinking, actually, that's something that we would like to look into a little bit more. We'd like to investigate. We want to see if we can become a disability confident employer, or we would like to see what the scheme entails. Then there is an option there for you to click that you would like more information. What I would say is, if you do want more information and you would like to get in touch with Sophie, on the next slide, Sophie's email address is going to be popped there. But if you just want to pop your email addresses into the chat, my colleague Hannah will be collating that, and then she will pass it over to Sophie for Sophie to contact you directly. So I'm just going to launch the poll for you now. So hopefully it should be up here and it says Disability Confident Poll 2. Again, it works in exactly the same way that the first poll does, that you can select your answer, submit it. Nobody will be able to see your answer. It is completely confidential, so nobody else can see your answers. And then Sophie will be able to talk to you a little bit about the answers that you've given, and if you want any more information when we've got the results. So again, we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes, sort of 2 to 3 minutes, just to answer the questions here on the poll. I think in particular that the scheme itself is really progressive, it's really inclusive. It's something that is letting organisations increase their employer brand and really become a leader of change. Unfortunately, there has been quite a significant gap when it comes to sort of engaging and introducing somebody with a disability into the place of work. And I don't think that's because employers don't want to. I think sometimes it's through a fear of getting something wrong. So hopefully with the right support, with the right mentorship, with support from us, from the council, with that scheme that Sophie talked to you about, in relation to the local supportive employment, where they can partner with you and create that partnership. I mean, to get 90% on the first assessment that they've had obviously means they're doing something right. It means that they are a market leader. So please do utilise that if you do want to become a more inclusive employer, and look at that. So I'll just give you another sort of 30 seconds just to answer the questions on the poll here. Is there anything else you want to add, Sophie, just around sort of the scheme itself, around how people can contact you, whether it's run through sort of yourselves, DWP, anything like that?
Yeah, so I should know that disability confident and the application and how you progress with that is done via the DirectGov website, and it's largely in part done by the DWP. But because we work in partnership with them, we like to signpost, we like to support, and we collaborate with them. So an actual application would go directly through the .gov website. It wouldn't go through ourselves, but any support, the supported employment support partnership, or any training, or any other diagnostic sort of, we can come in to a business and look at what we could implement to support you, is done via us at Opportunity Sheffield. But if you were to get in contact with us about it, it certainly wouldn't be a waste. We can signpost you in the right place, and we definitely work in partnership with them as well.
Fabulous. Right, so I'll just end the poll for everyone there now, and I'll just go through some of the sort of answers and the questions that were asked there. So the first question was, what is the purpose of the Disability Confidence Scheme? So there was four options on there. It was every single one. So it's to challenge attitudes towards disabilities, it's to increase understanding of disability, it's to remove barriers to a disabled individual and those with long-term health conditions, and it's to draw the widest possible pool of talent, secure high quality staff who are skilled, loyal and hardworking. So everybody clicked there are 3 levels. That is absolutely correct. I did ask a question around how everybody felt in terms of whether you felt you as individuals or your organisation were working towards being a disability confident employer, and what level you sort of thought you sat. So we've got a real mixed response there. We've got quite a lot of individuals, organisations on the webinar today who are saying that they are inclusive employers, but you're not working towards a level under the scheme, and that's okay. You know, it's not something that you have to do. It's not, you don't have legal obligation. It's just providing you with the sense of what it actually means, how you can go through that scheme and how you can become a disability confident employee. But you don't have to, as long as you are being inclusive, as long as you are providing opportunities for everybody and ensuring that you have real equity across your recruitment process, the staff that you employ, and provide those equal opportunities for everyone. And that's really the goal that we want everyone to be moving towards. And there are a couple that said they were level 1, a couple that said level 2, and we've got one employee who thinks that they're at level 3, which is absolutely fantastic. And then we've got around about 50% of you who are asking that you would like more support in achieving a disability confident level under the scheme. So if you do want to pop your email addresses into the group chat, we have just had one come through there in relation to them wanting a little bit more information. So please feel free to pop your email addresses into the chat or to contact Sophie directly. And she will be able to talk to you a little bit more and refer you to the correct individuals to go through the Disability Confidence Scheme. This is Sophie's email address. If anybody wants to jot that down, please don't spam her. But if you'd like to jot that down, you can obviously contact her. You can find out a little bit more about the scheme itself. So what we are just going to do to sort of bring the session to an end today is we are just going to look a little bit more around the legal considerations. We are going to focus very much on disability legal considerations. So as I'm sure many of you have heard before, some of you will have attended our webinars before on the Equality Act 2010 and more specifically equality and diversity altogether. Today we are going to look at specifically disability discrimination. Some of you will have heard of sort of the umbrellas under the Equality Act, such as direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, harassment and victimisation. Some of you may not have heard of the two that are specific to disability, which is discrimination arising from a disability and a failure to make reasonable adjustments. So I'm going to go through those two in a little bit more detail in just a moment. So those two types of discrimination I'm going to go through. What I thought would be really key for you is just to have a little bit of understanding of what the four above do actually mean. So direct discrimination is discrimination as a result of somebody's protected characteristic, and they're treated less favourably as a result of one of these protected characteristics. Now, we haven't gone through the Equality Act in detail. That wasn't what today's webinar is for. We provide other webinars and other training on equality and diversity more generally, on what the Equality Act is and those 9 protected characteristics. So if you want more information, please get in touch with us and we can direct you to our other training programs that provide information on that. But for your clarity, for today's purpose, disability is one of those 9 characteristics. So for a direct discrimination claim, somebody would have needed to have been treated less favourably as a direct result of that characteristic there. We've then got indirect discrimination, which is based on a PCP. So that's a provision, criterion, or practice. So you're treated less favourably as a result of this PCP. So effectively what we mean by PCP is a rule, a requirement, or a policy at work. So if there's a policy at work, there's a sickness absence policy, let's say, and that sickness absence policy directly disadvantages you, so it places you at a disadvantage as a result of your disability, then that could be an indirect discrimination claim. We've got harassment, which is unwanted conduct that's related to your protected characteristics, so related to your disability, that creates a hostile, intimidating, degrading, humiliating environment for you as a person. And then you've got victimisation, which is where you're treated differently as a result of your protected characteristic because you've done something or they perceive that you're going to do something. So for example, let's say you raised a grievance about being discriminated against on the grounds of your disability and you're treated differently because you've raised a grievance, or if you ask for a reasonable adjustment as a result of your disability and then you're treated differently, that could be a victimisation claim. So I'm just going to go through disability, discrimination arising from a disability, and failure to make reasonable adjustments in slightly more detail for you here. So discrimination arising from a disability is when a person is treated unfairly because of something connected to their disability rather than the disability itself. So it's not that you're being treated differently because you have a certain condition, it's something arising or it's something that's connected to that disability. So you have to have been treated unfavourably. So it has to be unfavourable treatment. So for example, it could be, you know, things that result from someone's disability could include absences from work because of regular hospital appointments. So if you're treated unfavourably as a result of you needing to attend regular hospital appointments, that's something connected to your disability. It's not your disability itself. It's not that as a reason it's connected to, and that would be a discrimination arising from a disability. So unlike direct discrimination, there's no need to compare one person's situation with that of somebody else. All the person needs to be able to show is that they were treated unfavourably because of something to do with their disability. Sometimes it's not always discrimination if the employer can show that there's a good enough reason for the purpose of carrying out the act that they carried out. You'll see when you look at the indirect discrimination legislation, it refers to the proportionate means of achieving legitimate aim. So if you're wanting to achieve a certain aim and you have a good reason as to why you have done something and the fact that you didn't mean to or intend it to treat somebody unfavourably, and if it is that objective justification, you have a good reason, it may act as a defence. Not always, but it may act as a defence in any claim that is pursued. Always seek advice around these things. Unfortunately, we're not all experts when it comes to individuals' disabilities. We're not all experts in terms of what they do need when it comes to reasonable adjustments. You know, we're not all experts when we understand what is a consequence of somebody's disability. So you do need to think about getting advice when you have somebody in the place of work who potentially has a disability and you want to know how to support them and how to encourage them and how to make your workplace inclusive for them. So then we've got a failure to make reasonable adjustments. So it's really important here, and a lot of people think, and it partly probably because of the name, that the claim here is if you fail to make an adjustment for a person, so if you've got somebody with a disability and if they ask for adjusted working hours, let's say, so you've got somebody who perhaps has got ADHD, they struggle with timekeeping, they struggle to get up in the morning, they struggle with their structure, their routine. If they've asked for an adjustment around their working hours and a bit of flexibility there, it's not just a claim because you failed to make it. So they can absolutely bring a claim because you failed to put an adjustment in place. But what the claim also entails is if you make that adjustment and then unreasonably take it away from them. So you do need to think it's an initial failure to make, but also it's acting inconsistent with that adjustment and taking it away from somebody without objective justifications as to why you have done that. So by law, an employer needs to consider making an adjustment when they know or could have been expected to know that an employee or a job applicant has a disability. So with this question here, we go back to what we discussed at the start of the session, and perhaps we look at the question around, is there a legal obligation for you as an employer to ask if somebody needs adjustments at interview? No, there isn't. But if there could be an argument made that you should have expected that this person, or you could have been expected to know that they had an impairment, whether it be physical or mental, and you don't make adjustments for them, you know, there could be a claim that falls under a failure to make adjustments here. So it may be good practice to get into the rhythm of being inclusive, being an employer who is open to being inclusive as part of their recruitment exercise and asking if somebody needs adjustments at that stage. So an employer is also considered to have needed to make adjustment when an employee or a job applicant with a disability asks for the adjustment, an employee with a disability is having difficulty with part of their job, or when an employee's absence record or sickness record is linked to their disability. So you may have to adjust your sickness absence process and make adjustments to your triggers when it comes to issuing warnings in line with that sickness process. I'm not going through that in detail today. Today's session and today's webinar is about providing you with an overview of the legal considerations itself. If you have something specific and quite a specific situation with one employee or a couple of employees, or about your process itself, please get in touch and we will support you, we will help you. A number of you on here are clients that we already know, individuals that we already work with. If we don't work with you and you think actually our sickness absence policy is quite outdated, I don't know what we'd do if somebody had a recognised impairment, or we think somebody has an impairment, but we don't know what to do, please get in touch and just have a chat with us, because we are more than welcome to support you and just have a conversation around what we can do about that. So just looking further into how to make reasonable adjustments, we need to think about identifying where reasonable adjustments should be considered. We need to consult with the individual and discuss the adjustments. We need to research options, give professional advice, get professional advice. We need to make decisions after full consultations. We need to document the decisions that we've made. And this is where I come back round to this objective justification. You're probably all tired of me saying objective justification because I've said it a lot today, but you really do need to base your decisions on facts and figures and justify why you've made that decision. You need to inform key persons within your organisation about the changes. So if you've agreed to adjust somebody's working hours, you need to tell key personnel within the organisation, because if not, you may think, why is Joe just rocked up 30 minutes late for work? You need to provide that information and consult. And you must always review the adjustments. We all know, and we've probably all seen, particularly more recently in the past sort of 2 to 3 years, businesses change overnight, businesses change month by month, circumstances change. So once you've made an adjustment, it isn't that adjustment's then stuck there and you can't change it. You can absolutely review it month on month, quarter on quarter. Just make sure it's still aligning with business objectives, with what you want to achieve, and also that it's still right for that person. Because you may put in place a adjustment, you may put in place something for someone to deal with their circumstance that they have at that moment in time. They might be adjusting to new medication. They might be having a spike in their condition. They may be awaiting an operation. They may be awaiting medical sort of therapy around the condition that they have. So they may only need the adjustment on a temporary basis. So make sure you're always reviewing it and you are always talking and consulting with the employee. A question that I think is probably on everybody's minds right now is, what is a reasonable adjustment? Unfortunately, that question is much like how long is a piece of string. What is a reasonable adjustment to one person is completely different to what is a reasonable adjustment to another. What you have to do is you have to fully assess it based on individual circumstances, understand what it is that they are wanting, why they need it, whether or not the business can actually implement it, and then create a plan going forward from there. You are not on your own when it comes to making reasonable adjustments and getting support. So I think, Sophie may be able to provide a little bit more information around this, but when it comes to making adjustments, there may be organisations that think that's too much of a financial impact for me. We can't afford it as a business. There are systems out there that can support you as an employer in implementing adjustments for employees. The first one that obviously comes to mind is access to work. So you can, for all of your employees, get an access to work assessment if they need an adjustment that for whatever reason financially it's not something that you can implement, or not even just financially, just sort of organisationally it's not something that you can offer. I've seen occupational health assessments, I've seen access to work assessments where occupational health and access to work, I'll explain what occupational health is in just a moment for those that don't know, but occupational health and access to work have recommended taxis to and from work for an individual to help them around social anxieties of getting on public transport and just sort of getting to and from work through that fear. They've paid for that. Access to work has provided funding for that individual to get to work. So, the employer noticed a barrier there. So you noticed a barrier to making an adjustment. But before you say no, and before you say no, we simply can't provide that, you look at consulting with other external organisations to see what support you can get and how you can access additional support for those individuals to make yourself an inclusive employer, ensuring that you have the opportunity and availability to accommodate such things that would support an individual. I mentioned occupational health there. So where an individual does have a disability, you can always seek to refer them to something called an occupational health therapist or physician, I think sometimes they are called. So they are medical professionals effectively that will assess somebody's fitness to practice or would assess somebody's availability to come back into the place of work or to assess what adjustments they need to enable them to do their role. And actually, if they are physically able to do their role, anybody who has a disability, who's had a little bit of time off sick, or if they're struggling to do their role, it's really key that you look at getting independent medical advice on that before you make any decisions on saying yes or no to reasonable adjustments, because what the tribunal will look at if a claim is pursued against you as a business is how did they reach this informed decision? How did they reach the consideration as to whether or not to implement that? Have they had any independent guidance? Have they looked outside of the box? Have they thought about what else they could implement? So anything like that is really key, that you are providing full consultation and you are speaking to everybody around what you can do. So just some ideas around adjustments that you could provide. And, these are just ideas. These aren't the only adjustments that you can put in place for individuals. They're not set, they're not specific to individuals. They're just some ideas for you. So you can make adjustments to somebody's work schedule, adjustments to role and responsibilities, somebody's working environment, equipment, technological support, anything like that. So for example, just some simple adjustments that you could put in place is allowing extra breaks and someone to take time. If somebody's diabetic, it may be that they need to check their blood sugar levels quite often. It may be that they need to take certain tablets. It may be that they need to check their insulin levels. So allowing extra breaks, allowing that private, confidential, safe space for them to go into, may be an adjustment that makes that person feel really connected, really valued, that you're including them, that you are taking account of their condition and making them feel comfortable at work, because it is about making someone feel comfortable. Providing somebody with the opportunity and support when it comes to prioritizing tasks and reassignments of duties that they find really difficult or they're struggling with. Sometimes individuals struggle to comprehend what's a priority and what's not. So providing them with that support, reviewing their workload on a one-to-one basis, line manager to employee or mentor to employee, is just prioritizing those tasks for them. Could be an adjustment that could be implemented sort of overnight that could, be worth loads to the individual and to the workplace. Offering sort of daylight desk lamps, adjustable light levels. You'll have heard of SAD, the sort of condition that a lot of people struggle with when you have darker nights, darker mornings. So you can provide day desk lamps to lighten the environment for them. You can provide organisers to help with time management. There are loads of adjustments that you can put in place. Yes, some come with cost implications. Yes, some you cannot implement from an organisational side of things. But if somebody comes to you and says they would like an adjustment of some nature, please don't just say, oh no, we can't do that. Look into it, have a look at other considerations, consult with them. It may be that someone's asking to work 11 till 7 rather than 9 till 5, and you may say, look, doesn't really meet our business need, but we'll meet you in the middle and do 10 till 6. Having that consultation with someone, adjusting what they've asked for in line with what you can do as a company and as an employer would be so valuable to you and to your organisation. So we are just going to do another quick poll just around sort of the legal considerations that we've discussed. Now, there is a scenario in this poll, so I suspect it will take people a little bit longer to read through the poll itself and read through the scenario. So I will give you a little bit more time. And then once we've done this poll, we will be looking at answering your questions that you've asked, because I've seen quite a few more coming through in the last sort of bit where we've been talking there. So I will launch the third poll for you now. So that should be launched. So there are only 3 questions on this one, but like I said, the last question there is a scenario question, so it may take you a little bit more time to answer that, which is absolutely fine. So I will just give you a couple of minutes to go through those. But like I said, if anybody has any questions, if anybody wants to drop anything in the chat box, please feel free to do so. I know some of you potentially had to drop off at 1 o'clock, which is absolutely fine. Keep in touch with us through our website, keep in touch with us by registering for our newsletter. We do these webinars all the time, so we are doing them sort of Every quarter, we are bringing out some really exciting, really topical points of conversation for you to look into and to learn more about. So please stay in touch and keep registered with all of our training events that we are doing. There's just been a question in there around the first poll question on there, just saying that potentially can't answer it because it is yes or no. That is correct. The answers have not come through the poll very well. So the answers have not transpired through. So we'll have to look at that. That's a slight technical glitch there. I'll just give you a couple more minutes, couple more seconds. I see quite a few people have answered the third scenario question, which is really good. And then I will be passing over to my colleague Hannah to go through any questions if anybody did have them, or for Hannah just talk to you a little bit more around the support that we may be able to provide you with if there aren't that many questions on there. Fabulous, so just another 10 to 15 seconds. Perfect. Right. I think most people have responded to the poll there. So looking at we'll jump into question 2, just because question 1 was probably quite difficult to answer. Someone's put, is it unlawful to remove a reasonable adjustment? So a few of you have gone for yes, quite a lot of you have gone for sometimes. It would be sometimes. So as I said, it is absolutely appropriate to review the reasonable adjustments that you've put in place. Wouldn't necessarily be directly unlawful to remove an adjustment if it's something that the business can no longer either financially afford or objectively justify to have in place because of the movement of the organisation. So if the business changes its position, if there has been an impact within the organisation, so if something has changed strategically or from a management side of things or from a staffing perspective, it may not be reasonable to provide that adjustment anymore. So sometimes it is appropriate and it is okay to remove that adjustment. So just looking at the scenario question here, the question was, an SME with 5 members of staff has recently recruited an employee who requires specific technology for the use of computers to enable them to do their job. The adjustment is likely to cost around about £50,000, which is more than the annual turnover of the organisation. The question was, would this be considered a reasonable adjustment that the employer has to implement? So there was 3 answers there. There was yes, no, or no, but. A lot of you went for no buts, and that would be correct. So we've put no, it wouldn't necessarily be reasonable for them to implement. You know, the cost is the same as their annual turnover. It's probably not going to be proportionate to put that adjustment in place, but they could speak to Access to Work or another funding provider to see if they can receive support with implementing that adjustment for the individual. If they're not able to receive the support and to get that funding there, then yes, absolutely may be appropriate to reject that and to refuse that adjustment there. But absolutely ensuring that you're doing that full consultation with the individual to make sure that you've got those options there is fully appropriate with that one. So we've done our final poll there. So just very quickly before we go on to your questions, I just wanted to touch on what we can actually do for you. So in order to show that you embrace inclusivity within your place of work, sometimes it's really important that you showcase them both within your recruitment documentation, but also your internal documentation. Sometimes it's more important to evidence what you do than just say that you do. It's really important that you can both say that you are inclusive, but also you can evidence that with the documentation that you provide to both employees and job applicants. So we can review your recruitment process, which includes your job advertisements, application forms, interview procedure and induction process, and your contracts of employment and policies. So for a free review, feel free to contact us on those email addresses there. What we will then do is we'll do sort of a little bit of a diagnostic. We'll have a look at what sort of your policies look like, if there's any tweaks that we'd recommend, and we'd open up that consultation and communication with you around how we can support your business and what we can do to ensure that you are embracing inclusivity within your place of work and across the documents in which you are providing. So just to give you an update on some of our training events that we've got coming up. So we have our annual Employment Law Conference, which is on the 21st of February so in 2 weeks' time. We are pleased to let you know it is actually now sold out. But if you would like to register and join our waiting list, then you are absolutely fine to do so. So if you just want to go through Eventbrite, you can join our waiting list, and as soon as a space becomes available, or if we get additional room for additional attendees to attend, you will be contacted to get your space. We are running an International Women's Day event, which is called, we've named it its title, Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. The cost of that is £15 plus VAT, and it will be hosted in collaboration with Sheffield United Women's Football Club. So if you would like to come along to that, then you can register via Eventbrite. We've got our next Charity Leaders Forum. So for anybody here who works in the voluntary third sector, you can come along to our Charity Leaders Forum, which is going to be talking about charity mergers. And our lovely Hannah will be doing a topic on TP, which I'm sure everybody loves. That is a free event that you can join, and you can register through Eventbrite again. We then have our HR Exchange meetups. That is an in-person meetup for individuals who are working in a HR profession who just want to get together and talk to like-minded individuals. So if you want to join that, then please let us know. And then we have our Biani Business Social on the 19th of June. Obviously, that's June, so it's going to be a summer one, so hopefully we can see some really nice weather for that. So I'm now going to pass over to Hannah to cover if any of you had any questions, or if you want to ask any questions live while Hannah is here, and then please feel free to pop them in the chat box. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you very much. Ellie, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Yeah, fabulous. Thank you very much. Yes, so I know there were a couple of questions that came through during the topics as we were discussing them, and some were answered. But I will just whiz over them in case people didn't see them, because I thought they were really good questions that people will probably be interested in. So the first question that we had through, somebody asked, would you say someone is disabled if they have a disability? Now, a disability, as we saw that Ellie explained, can be quite broad, and that can cover a number of different things. But I think the important thing that you need to consider in an employment sphere is that there is a different definition between a medical disability and a legal disability. So it is in the slides, and we're more than happy to send them out to you. But the definition would be a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial effect on your ability to undertake day-to-day activities. So that can cover a broad range of things. I wouldn't automatically assume that somebody does or does not have a disability, and I wouldn't automatically go up to somebody and say, I believe you're disabled. You know, it needs to be taken in a much more appropriate and sensitive manner, and it is maybe just be something that you need to discuss with the individual in a private setting to say, these are things that I believe to be the case. Can we explore those together? Do you need any adjustments from us? And open that topic of conversation. We're not going to be in a position to say, absolutely they are disabled, absolutely they are not. It may be something you might need more specific advice on, so do feel free to get in touch with us if it's something that you want to discuss in more detail. I know there was also a question that was given specifically to Sophie. Sophie did answer that for us, so thank you very much, but it was just in case other people didn't see it. Somebody asked, is the fully funded training available to businesses outside of the Sheffield region? So I think Sophie said it's based on the individual undertaking the training, so that depends on where they live and work. So again, if anybody wants any specifics, to contact Sophie directly. So I know her email address was previously given, and again, we will be getting in touch with everybody after the webinar for feedback, and you can request the slides, so you can also see the contact details in the slides then as well. Is that all right? I think that was all the questions that we had. Obviously, if anybody else has any other questions, now's your chance, or you can get in touch with us individually if you'd prefer as well. I appreciate some of you might only get limited lunch breaks and therefore need to disappear. That's absolutely fine. But just on the slide, just to make people aware, these are, I know Ellie's touched on them, everything that we can offer for you, but you know, if there is anything specific that you can see right in front of you that you think, actually, we do have a couple of live issues we need to get in touch with you about, or we need to be undertaking some workforce planning in the future. I know, unfortunately, there may be businesses out there that are considering redundancies or potential restructures and those types of things. It isn't just disabilities and assistance with employees with disabilities that we can assist you with. There are a wide range of things. So as you can see on the screen, if there's anything on there that takes your fancy, do again, please get in touch with us directly. And as I say, we will be in touch for feedback. If you can all please fill that in, that would be really, really great, because then we can also get a good idea of what more you want to see from us. So if there's anything specific that you think I've seen that happening, or I want more information on that, then that's your chance to let us know. There's a QR code now on the screen. If anybody wants to use their phones, you can download you can use that QR code to download any of our industry specific guides. So if you think, you know, I need something a bit more specific to my hospitality business or my construction firm, then again, those are available for you should you need them. We do also offer our watertight plan. So if you're thinking, you know, law firms, they can be looking at some larger fees. We do have a fixed fee solution. So if you need something that is going to be cost efficient, you're still going to get access to your experts in the industry, then this might be something that you want to consider. And again, please do reach out if you want any further information, but it essentially covers everything that we covered in those lovely wheels that were just previously on the screen. So do let us know, again, if that's something that you're interested in.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And then, oh, sorry, Hannah.
I was just about to say, these are the feedback forms. They will be sent to you, and you can request a copy of the slides, because I know somebody else asked about the slides.
Yeah, absolutely. The slides will be sent out to you all if you want to fill out the feedback forms. As Hannah said there is a QR code here for you to sign up to our free HR and employment law monthly newsletters. So please feel free to scan the QR code here. As I said to you during the webinar, we run loads of these events. So we run loads of free lunchtime webinars when it comes to different topical areas of discussion that you may want to know more information about. So please sign up to them along with our free webinars over a lunchtime period. We provide more in-depth bespoke training for organisations and individuals when it comes to managing staff, but not only that, managing your business support. So as those two wheels showed that Hannah went through with you, we can help you supporting your employee journey. So anything from recruiting somebody into your business through to terminating them from your organisation, if that is necessary, and everything in between. But also we can support you with your business strategic plan and business growth when it comes to looking at forecasting, looking at project management for you around what would be a really great initiative for your organisation to undertake. So please sign up to our events. Please get in touch if you do need any support. And I suppose the only thing to say from all of us, from myself, from Sophie and from Hannah, is just to say thank you ever so much for attending today's webinar. We really hope that you have got some really insightful information in there and you really did enjoy it. If you do want any further information, or you would like to speak to any of us individually or Biani Law or the council, then please do get in touch. But thank you ever so much for all attending, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day and week.